confiscate every telescope in the world to keep this secret hidden. There's also been postings of pictures and other so-called evidence of Planet X, all of which have been shown to either be an admitted hoax or a mistake of some kind. There are actual pole shifts that do occur, both magnetic pole shifts and physical pole shifts, and we are in the middle of a long process of a magnetic pole shift, the biggest effect of which is that we will have to relabel our compasses in a few hundred years. The following is an excerpt from an article from NASA. Reversals take a few thousand years to complete, and during the time, contrary to popular belief, the magnetic field does not vanish. It just gets more complicated, says Glatzmeyer. Magnetic lines of force near Earth's surface become twisted and tangled, and magnetic poles pop up in unaccustomed places. A south magnetic pole might emerge over Africa, for instance, or a north pole over Tahiti. Weird, but it's still a planetary magnetic field, and it still protects us from space radiation and solar storms. I might suggest that it's ridiculous to pinpoint a specific date, such as December 21st, 2012, for this happening, not just because it's such a slow process, but because the proposed reason, such as a galactic alignment, isn't even true, thus making it a non-issue. The other kind of pole shift is a physical pole shift. Let's first set the record straight that this would require an event of tremendous energy, and that it is not part of any cycle or natural occurrence, and no increasing of solar energy would be enough to cause this. We have actually had a few degree shift of the poles in the past, but not a reversal by any means. It's what's called a true polar wanderer. William Sager, in an article entitled Texas A&M Oceanographer Challenges Plate Tectonics as a Reason for the Pole Shift, says, our data set indicates that this polar shift took place at a rate between 5 and 10 degrees per million years. He said, essentially, it happens within the blink of an eye in terms of geological time. So what this means is that scientists who call this event fast call fast 5 to 10 million years, and that predicting a specific date for this to happen is again ridiculous, especially considering that we are told that the Mayans predicted it using of precession, which couldn't have any less significance to this event, no matter how well that they understood it. So let's take a look at what supposedly got this whole thing started, the Mayan calendar. The first question is, did the Mayan long count calendar predict the end of the world? No. There is no reference to this concept in Mayan culture. These ideas about the Mayan calendar are imposed by us, and not by the Mayans. Again, quoting John Major Jenkins, he says, I do not concur with the Neo-Atlantean pole shift cataclysmologists on the idea that the world will literally end in 2012. With this distinction in mind, I admit that I still occasionally write as a shorthand note, end date, or end date in 2012. This does not mean that I believe the Mayan calendar or the world will end in AD 2012. Often when you listen or read or watch a presentation on 2012, they will make the jump from the resetting of the calendar to it must mean that the major cataclysms are coming in a very slick way, usually not dwelling on this important transition. Those that do mention it usually cite one of the following reasons to tie it together. Number one, that a Mayan ballgame was actually symbolism that told us about galactic alignment, and number two, that certain pictorials of the sacred tree also speak of galactic alignment. While I don't agree with the logic used to make these connections and think that they are far-fetched, and in some cases frivolous, for the sake of argument, I will say that the Mayans did, for whatever reason, choose to end their calendar on this 2012 solstice because of the visual effect of the sun rising in galactic center on that date, and that they fully knew of this effect. But even then, this would only be of local, religious, or mathematical significance. That is to say, if the Mayans believed it was a symbol of rebirth when the sun appeared in the Milky Way galaxy, it would be their prerogative. But it wouldn't have any galactic importance. There's also this idea that the Mayans were able to miraculously determine these events, but it should be noted that Western society discovered the precession of the equinoxes at least 100 years before the first Mayan calendar was ever made, so it wasn't exactly a new concept. The calculations to determine these events are not magical, but a matter of mathematics and astronomical observations. The Mayan culture stayed stable for centuries, so it's entirely possible for an astronomer to plot the position of some stars at midnight at the equinox, and his grandson to plot the same stars 72 years later, and realize that the stars had all shifted 1 degree in that time. Multiply by 360, and you get the precession cycle of 26,000 years. Almost certainly this is how they did it, because that's all it takes. So, were the Mayans predicting the end of the world? Definitely not. In fact, the entire reason, as far as I can tell, for this hype is that the Mayans restart their calendar, much like we do on December 31st. But they did it on a solstice, which they had the mathematical skill to do fairly easily. We are the ones responsible for this 2012 fever. We have put a lot of words in the Mayans' mouths. We have thrown pole shifts and Planet X and solar flares and everything else into the mix, all of which have no connection and not only weren't suggested by the Mayans, but it would be impossible to predict any of those things using any of the methods we are told that they used to make such predictions. Not to mention that we have been told untruths about things like our solar system aligning with galactic center, which it did 3 million years ago, and we won't be returning for another 30 million years. I think there could be many reasons why this idea is so actively being promoted to the world. I encourage you to draw your own conclusions.